So there's a statement when we did research for this topic, and I'm going to read it off the sheet because I just don't, I can't believe this is really happening a lot. I think it might be happening in small shops, maybe where it's not a lot of governance, but I can't see me doing this. I mean, my boss would be all over me if I did this, but here's a statement. AI spend is the new shadow IT. Individual employees and teams subscribing on corporate cards or expense reports with zero visibility until the invoice lands. I can't see that happening in my workplace.
I can absolutely see that happening. I believe it. I promise you that is.
Really?
Yeah, I have no doubt on that.
Welcome to the Wide Garage with Pops. Somewhere in your company right now, 3 different teams are paying for 3 different AI tools on 3 different corporate cards, and nobody in IT or finance knows any of them exist. That's not a hypothetical. That's just a regular Tuesday. So let's pick up a wrench, pop open a cold one, and let's open and dive in.
Or 2, since it's Tuesday.
That's right.
The business wants speed, IT wants solutions to meet the desire for that speed, and finance wants control over the spending. And whoever ignores the budget conversation loses the seat at the table. Today, we're talking about why your teams need to start treating AI subscription like assets before finance does it for you with a blunt instrument.
Yeah. So what does shadow AI actually look like inside an organization right now? Where do you think it's hiding?
I think it's hiding anywhere you have an AI client and a human being. I think the theme that I've seen and the space that we're in today and how we got here is there was a lot of experimentation, a lot of encouragement. I don't know if you remember the term token maxing. That is something that is slowly going away. And in building out these solutions and experimenting, all these ideas came about on how we can create speed and how we can be faster in delivery, all the new insights that we can gather from the data that was previously siloed. And folks are building a lot of point solutions that are solving a very specific problem, sometimes the same problem, in their own way across whatever AI it is that they choose. So when you ask me, where is it hiding? I would say everywhere you don't have an intake and governance process for it. Why is AI spend harder to track than traditional software spend?
I think you can track, I don't know, the generic invoice, annual invoice, monthly invoice, quarterly invoice, wherever that comes. You may be able to track the assist tokens, whatever that is, and maybe even towards the account of who's using it, but how they're applying it, where to differentiate where Brian and Steele might be working on the same project and not know it, and you're actually losing, money and spend, right?
Yeah.
I know they have projects, but what I term a project and what you term project could still be loosely, and my projects don't link with your projects, at least from what I understand, what I see.
I think there is an arrears tracking in that you probably have a pack of tokens or a pack of AI usage, and you type in a prompt and you walk away. You may have deep think on, you may have the most expensive frontier model on, or you're testing out the new one. And some of this licensing is turning into consumption base, or what you are building with it is more complex. You're no longer asking, hey, what's today? What's 2 plus 2? You're putting in design specs and you're one-shotting an application, and that is consumption based. And I think the reason why it's so difficult to track is because the lack of intake, governance, traceability, the amount of usage is jagged. And if you have somebody who has auto approval on, Or I think the best example I've seen is there are people that have let AI with OpenClaw completely control their computers. Well, the entire time it is running, it is generating spend. And so we have the technology, we're using AI, but how are we actually tracking that spend? And I don't know that we have a good answer for that.
And I don't think the things are moving so fast and there's so many unknowns that we're not building the fortress we have back in like we do, like we end up doing with cloud eventually. We've done with cloud now or
Just
hard
like cloud,
infrastructure,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
It's like we're venturing into the Wild West. We're building log cabins. We don't know what kind of elements, warfare, all these different things. I don't know how I'm going to feed my family the next day. You're kind of just going day to day, trying to figure it out and not die from it. And I think that's sort of where we're at. But the advantage is you have freedoms. You have a whole wild west of things. You have new experiences. You're not limited by governance from the old world. So I think there's things there that's enticing you, but I think there's still a lot of things to figure out. And I think that's the part that's hard to track, and figure out where you gain.
You can build a log cabin now with a keyboard. Maybe
Yeah,
digitally, just
there you go.
digitally.
Maybe
Not yet physically. One
basically
day.
a 3D printer, maybe.
Yeah.
Has finance actually started pushing back yet, or is this still building towards a breaking point?
I have not heard. I've heard of some anecdotal evidence where some of that free interest period rate expense has increased and where folks have gotten some shock bills. I've heard of one person racking up 2 grand plus with I think it was Fable 5
Mhm.
in 24 hours. And I think that's using the wrong model for the job, was their finding.
Those
Just
are
because
huge outliers. These stories you hear about are things that I bet you there's other stories with that person that are like that.
Yeah. And I think what that shows is you took a Ferrari to drive to the grocery store. You didn't take it to the track. You didn't use it for its intended purpose. Not an apples to apples analogy, but essentially it. What the takeaway was is that there was other models that were not frontier models just as capable at planning and providing some of that result where they should have just used the engine from the Ferrari. They didn't need everything else.
And he also took the Ferrari and drove it as if it was a pickup truck or a Volkswagen, or used it like Google or GitHub. It isn't. It isn't the same thing. You know what I'm saying? They didn't do it with guidance. They didn't do it with caution. They didn't do it with education, right? Or they wouldn't have done what they did. They wouldn't have had the build they had.
Yeah, it was the new thing. Let's test it out. Turns out the new thing is also really expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't we know that from Azure, from, AWS? Didn't we learn that lesson then?
Yeah, and it seems like those past lessons when cloud came onto the scene also seem to apply here. And I think there's lessons that we should carry forward in this space.
So there's a statement when we did research for this topic, and I'm going to read it off the sheet because I just don't, I can't believe this is really happening a lot. I think it might be happening in small shops, maybe where it's not a lot of governance, but I can't see me doing this. I mean, my boss would be all over me if I did this, but here's a statement. AI spend is the new shadow IT. Individual employees and teams subscribing on corporate cards or expense reports with zero visibility until the invoice lands. I can't see that happening in my workplace.
I can absolutely see that happening. I believe it. I promise you that is.
Really?
Yeah, I have no doubt on that.
It would
And
not fly
that's not
where
just
I've been.
that's not just. I mean, if you have given the authority to someone who owns a corporate card is at a certain level, and they can swipe it, even if go back to the 99-cent app examples, you have budget, you put it on a card. That goes back to governance. That goes back to looking at.
Well, it's governance. It's when you get the card, you get taught how to use the card, what could be on the card, what we're going to repay on the card, and what you're responsible for on the card.
I've seen SaaS applications paid for on a corporate card.
I thought I had more confidence in our world. So okay,
We
I'm
like to
glad I read
learn.
it. And I now know more.
We like to learn the same lessons over and over.
Oh my. Okay. All right. So, what would it take to treat an AI subscription on an API key like a governed IT asset? What's the minimal viable process?
So you used a keyword there, a couple of keywords, but the one that stood out for me was
Besides the
asset.
word key?
Besides the word key, haha. I'm lacking on my puns today, and that is the term asset. And
And
you
Taco
can,
Bell did not pay for this. Or we'd like Taco Bell to sponsor this, but Taco Bell did not sponsor this episode.
or Mighty Taco up in New York.
The dirty Bob.
Yeah, delicious though. So being able to, just like cloud spend, SaaS spend, tracking your subscriptions in AI, tracking the utilization, in order to track it, it's we consider this an asset. It's something that we need to manage the financial values of. And there are platforms out there that are capable of tracking it. And the place where I'm seeing this pop up first is in a CMDB. I say first is probably manually in a spreadsheet first, and then eventually makes its way into a CMDB, configuration management database. And then you are able to look at what models are being used, what data sets are being used, what skills, what prompts was it connected to. Discovering that, although it's that technology is still early, that is the direction that it is heading because of the blast radius being so large with AI and so quick. We talked a couple episodes ago about someone losing their entire database in 9 seconds and the backup. Being able to track the blast radius, being able to track what has access to what, where, and being able to track the spend is incredibly important to the success of adoption and sustainability and keeping this going forward. And so you have to treat it like an asset. You have to treat it as something that you manage as part of solutions that you deliver. If you use it to deliver a solution to your customer and then you have to remove that feature because of unmanaged spend, you're going to have an upset customer. I
So,
think MVP is knowing what you own,
mhm, I agree.
how much you spend, and what.
So I agree with this. So before you do your question, I'm gonna try to. I'll probably end up pitching you a softball in this one, but my question is on my question. Does it? What's the difference between? I know the difference between the software itself is different, or the application itself is different. But what's the difference between that and Salesforce, ServiceNow, Microsoft 365, and some AI subscription? Aren't they all the same? They're cloud. Their subscriptions are user based. Sometimes it's use based
It,
within the service.
yeah, there's by and large, it's dealt in tokens. Now you might
You run into
have
that sometimes with a with service. Now you run into that without
it,
AI even.
so and hopefully I'm understanding the question here. In things like ServiceNow, I think it's called a SIS. So it's not tokens, it's a SIS, and you buy that in packs. In other platforms, if you're using Cloud, if you're using Copilot, etc., it's based off your usage.
But it's all kind of same thing, different terms.
Yeah, same thing, different terms. That's accurate. And underneath it is tokens as the thing that is being consumed. Which, in order to produce tokens, you need power, you need the compute, you need memory, everything that the data centers are providing. And, anyways, all the vendors are essentially selling you that consumption of tokens, that compute, which may be at a token level, it may be at a per month level, and then there's different tiers of that. And I think that changes constantly. So even what we're saying today or the landscape that we're in now could look very different in 3 months, 6 months, could completely change.
And these
So
would include things like Zapier and Make
mhm,
and stuff like that too, right?
yes,
Because we use a utility of it, we tie into it. We still need to treat it as some type of asset.
yes. And I would say the exception to this would be anything that you do locally. However, that really struggles to scale if you don't have your own data center. Yeah. So, how does usage based billing, so tokens, API calls, etc., break that traditional software asset management playbook?
So there used to be like LexisNexis in legal back in the day. You would have users and
Mhm.
subscriptions, but you also had to pay per printed page on the LexisNexis printer that sat in your physical office. I know it's 1980s, 1990s when this happened, and we probably weren't speaking, but that idea was there. And so you had to watch what you printed. Windows printing was a very big thing back then because Windows printing kind of circumvented that Lexus printer. But so this sort of thing, I think it's just another level of, I don't know what asset, but costing, right? Budgeting.
I
It's
mean,
a, it's an,
like talking on the phone and paying for your minutes are what I
yeah,
think of.
yeah, it's a lot like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nothing new. It's just in a new area.
Yes. And what it is providing and the value it is providing is different.
It can be billable. Well,
Yes.
so can minutes, long distance within law firms are billed to the client.
Yep. Yeah.
So
And so I think it doesn't really break the traditional playbook. I think there's answers for it that exist. I think it's that we have to develop the muscles for tracking it, and maybe the tooling looks a little different.
it's showing up in places that we didn't have before. It's sweet potatoes. It's growing up inside your green beans.
We're just gonna leave that one on the floor.
Had to bring that Indiana heritage out. Okay. So where does ownership sit for an AI tool, a business unit adopted on its own? IT, finance, or the business unit?
On the CEO. It's on everybody. It's everybody's responsibility. If you think about the costs and you think about risk, it is introducing risk into the footprint of the business.
I
And
think
so
everyone owns it. You're right.
yeah, I
But a
everybody has
really
to own that risk. It is so essentially at the end of the day, the business owns the risk. The teams that brought that into the footprint have responsibility to follow the governance, the policies, the standards to manage this thing. It is shared risk.
yeah, there's a 2-minute hockey penalty for that team that brought it on without going through the right process.
Yes. And I think being able to catch that and correct is a good capability to have.
Depending on the degree of what they brought on and the history of how many times they've done this, it could be job changing, in my opinion.
That's fair, depending on how many databases it deletes in 9 seconds. What's the right review cadence to that point? So let's say we've brought stuff on, we've reviewed it, and we've approved it. What would be a cadence in reviewing that? And I think let's keep this simple. So let's just focus on the cost element of it. So let's say we brought AI in, we're using it, and now it's time for the piper to get its due. What does the cadence for that look?
It's monthly until you understand it. And only when you understand it can you bring it out to quarterly, biannual, or anything different than that. But you got to look at every invoice because you don't know what scenario has unearthed itself in this invoice, right? So you have to look at every invoice with your vendor and you and the user who's doing it to understand what's at play, how did it happen, where do we put it, were we supposed to get billed for that, is it in the contract? Just to understand all those elements. So one, when I go to renewal, I also know where do I start searching for cheaper token unit pricing. You know, you need to understand every parts of that. I think it's monthly until you understand it, and then you can discuss breaking it further out.
I'm going to ask you a follow up here. What about when you roll out a new capability?
What do you mean?
So let's say you roll out knowledge article generation. You introduce an AI search, knowledge article generation, a build agent that can develop things for you. How often should you check when it's new functionality?
Yeah, because that can happen moment to moment. I mean,
Almost,
some of that stuff you can go almost really weird and go daily and weekly for a
yeah.
while. It's all about understanding it. If you want, it's not no different than an asset. If once you understand your asset, you can get a little bit further away from it. But until you understand your asset, you have to stay on it. You have to nuzzle up to it.
So you have to understand your asset before you can cover your asset.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
true.
Yep.
Because you got to answer to it, right?
Mhm.
Someone's going to be coming to you and saying why, and you have to be able to explain why. And if you can't, you didn't do your job.
Yep.
So, what are these other little? Oh, we had another question. Sorry, go ahead. That has me in it. How do you build a trading tracking process? Okay, this is where we work. It doesn't feel like it's bureaucracy to teams trying to move fast. I don't care. We have to understand it.
Yeah, it's governance, unfortunately, and
Unfortunately,
governance. You know, what, I'll rephrase. I'll rephrase, Your Honor. I think it is governance so that you can smooth out the process. Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. And that growth and maturity allows you to move fast and
what
prevent the bad
what
things from happening.
what if the ServiceNow rep comes to you and says, "Hey, I'll give you 6 months free in that area to let you develop it, get used to it"? Are you still going to watch it as tight as if you're being billed for it?
Daily, sometimes weekly. Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
think so
your
too.
chance.
And at some point, you gotta still understand it, because at some
Yep.
point, you're gonna be paying for it. Why
Yes.
let people get used to it, depend on it? If it becomes the 12 million, what it was, a $12 million squirrel, whatever that little statement thing we read of,
Yeah.
you know?
I think I heard just recently that Meta used 60 trillion, I think it was 60 trillion tokens at the tune of $900 million. I just couldn't remember if it was in a month or a year. I can't remember. It must have been a year. There's no way they did that in a month, hopefully. But we'll have to look that one up. But that's that you gotta understand what you're using.
All right, the tune-up. We're in the tune-up section. Beyond cost, what data and security risks come with untracked AI tool sprawl?
All of them. Everything that keeps your CISO up at night comes with them. I think, to use an example I saw recently, somebody rolled their own MCP server, custom. They used AI to build it, which is great. They got really fast value. It used about not 6 to 9 third-party libraries to do that, a whole bunch of Python code. And when I looked at those third-party libraries, they weren't up to date and they were vulnerable. And put them in a software tool which shows the vulnerabilities at the different versions. And I mean, it was a significant amount of versions back. And that's so easy to do. If you've been given, hey, this is an easy way to create an MCP server, and you can have your AI do it and generate it, then you're off and working. Why would you ever think to go back and double check what is working? And so it's that type of devil in the detail things that you have to lean on your good process, on your security practices to be able to find that stuff. There are processes built to find it, but if you stop following your processes, that's going to come with some sleepless nights. What's the first conversation IT should have with finance to get ahead of this spending conversation instead of reacting to it?
All right. So my first thing is I want to know, how much do I think I'm going to spend in this tool annually? You're right. When I talk about, okay, I'm going to bring this on, I need to find out from my vendor about how much we're going to spend. I need to find that out before we can do anything about it. I need to go to finance and say, okay, I got a new tool. I think we're going to spend about X amount this year, with probably a 5, 10, 15, 20% increase every year. What is your appetite for this? Where are you on this? And I just want to know kind of where they're feeling. I don't want them to give me a number. I want to give them a number, but I also want to see their reaction to that number and where it fits. And I kind of play along with them to some extent. If they say we don't have room for this, at least the financial people I've worked with, they
Mhm.
would say you need to get X to sign off on this. We don't have any approvals to move that high up or move that far or to commit to this. Go to this person. I've always had a decent relationship with the finance because I've always been honest with them and tried to do my best for them. And I think that's what I would do. I'd come up with a number and I try to stand behind it the best I can.
Is there anything that you would bring collateral wise to that conversation?
I would bring with a diagram what we're trying to achieve. I would bring like the flow. This is what we're going to gain from it. I'm not going to promise offset of costs that they can take money to shift and pay Peter
Mhm.
to pay Paul, because that could never works usually out the way it's drawn out. Some of that does work out, but it's usually in different ways, different amounts than usual. And if anything, that's just icing on my cake, right? That if I get that, then that's great. I delivered more. It's like I'm trying to set the bar at my worst, at my modest in a sense. And
Mhm.
that way I can do better. I just don't want to oversell. And then they say, yeah, but you said this. And they're not going to believe me the next time I come knocking on a door. So that's at least my first conversation with them is, here's the product we're looking for. Here's what I'm trying to establish. And we do that. We have these little cards that it gives the pros, the cons, the risks, the timing, the vendors, the operational expense, the capital expense, the annual recurring expense. It's all on a one sheeter that we send to finance. So I think that's my first conversation. Is there a version of this that goes too far, where governance kills the legitimate experimentation of this period?
Yeah, I think there is the absolute no AI policy whatsoever that kills it.
I think
And
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'll have you add on to this. We're in a world today where there's legitimate use cases where AI excels. It is a
Mhm.
tool that we have not had before that does certain jobs better than pre-existing tools. To not experiment, to not try it out is a disservice to yourself, your clients, and your customers that you are trying to serve. The cat is out of the bag in this space. The toothpaste is not going back in. And there are folks that are reaping just an insurmountable amount of value for specific use cases. So I think if you don't use AI at all, that would be going too far and you're doing yourself a disservice and your customers.
So let me draw a line. Would you say using AI in replacement of Google using AI, Google search?
If you're if your use case is that you don't want to have provide your search queries to Google and you want to send it all to this specific AI, or maybe you have an agreement that they can't train on your data, whereas Google does, it would depend on the use case. That I'm just throwing out an example use case. I don't know that I would use it replace an external vendor search with it. If you have internal knowledge, internal tribal knowledge that is important to the company, and this is your intelligence
You
product,
shouldn't use Google either.
I think then that builds up a use case for using search in that context. Still, if you're doing something in the public space, just be wary of what you're giving your data to, where your queries are going, and it just depends on the use case. The thing I would just to close out, and then I'll pass it over to you. If you are replacing something that does not cost with something that does cost, is it providing the value that you are paying?
Yeah. Okay. I get it. My approach is I'm like you. I'm in that. I would try the low hanging fruit of AI before I go splinter the back end of my business spine trying to correct something in an agentic AI or something very deep. I would try out getting used to prompting the mechanics of it, how it's built, how it acts, what it does in a sense before I would take bet my business on it.
I
Yeah.
think that's fair. If a listener wants to start tracking AI spend at their org next week, what's the first concrete step?
I think it's a weird question because, there's my business has contracts with like ChatGPT and some other entities, and they can see different types of billing and where I can see as a Claude Pro individual user that I pay my own money for. So it's a little bit different there, maybe. I just think it whatever level. I think if you're an individual user, you just got to understand what you're being billed for. Just like this Fables thing, this Fables 5 that's been introduced like
Yeah.
for the next couple of weeks. I'm allowed to use it, but it uses 50% more of my
It
usage.
sure does.
And you know what I
Yep.
mean? Understand that. Read that fine print and understand what it's going to do to you before you start having to pay out and beyond the pro $20 a month. So I think reading and understanding, you can't just do what we did with Google and everything else and just let the license agreement just be check it and move on. You need to understand this stuff.
I know that they have metrics underneath the utilization of all of these models,
Hmm.
and it's at their prerogative to set the price of each one. And I don't think it's an accident that their latest model is double the price of their last frontier amazing model.
Hmm.
I think there is a little bit of pricing strategy that is going on. And they're going to find out where that optimum band is. And that's probably where they will stick. But I think the advice that you had, which is use it personally and look at the spend, is phenomenal. I think that will show. I mean, I'm very much having to use it to see it type of person. That's how I grasp concepts. And that is what helped me understand AI the best, the limitations, but also the expense. I was using it personally.
Yeah. So there's also how they play with you. Like I'm looking at my Claude and I can see my current session. I got limits on my current session. I've also got I got limits on my weekly. I got Fable weekly limits. And then I got a little checkbox that says turn on usage credits to keep using Claude if you hit your limit. In other words, you want to pay additional for it, right? They're playing fuzzy with you. Why is there a daily usage? And then there's also weekly usage. It's almost like, and it says in there, sometimes you may hit your daily only once in 30 days. They'll still let you use it because your weekly has barely been tapped. But if you've tapped your
Interesting.
weekly and you've hit your daily, they're
If
playing fuzzy math with you a little bit.
if they are tracking it, shouldn't you?
Yeah, I agree. All right. Visibility restriction is a strategy. Orgs that build lightweight intake tracking models before the spend spike goodwill with the business. So orgs that only react after the invoice keep neither goodwill nor control. So I think
Yep.
that's a good statement.
Yeah, whoever ignores the budget conversation loses that seat at the table. I think that's it. That's the episode. Don't ignore that utilization. So drop a comment. Is AI spend already a line item at your shop? Or are you still finding out about it from the invoice? Specific beats generic. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, this has been the Wired Garage with Pops. I'm Pops, and that's Steele. And that's a wrap. So subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.
Cheers.